Hi, welcome to week 43, book 43, Reamde by Neal Stephenson, published in 2011. Now, I read this book differently than the other books I've read so far, as I read this audiobook. I do own a copy of Reamde from years and years and years ago, probably whenever the first edition paperback was published, because published in 2011, I know for certain that I have a paperback, but I don't know where it is. So I read the audiobook. I tried to read the book itself years ago and didn't make it through it. Made about maybe third to halfway. Uh, I also, a little later, about 4 or 5 months later, after I put the book down, tried to do the audiobook, and I made it about a little bit further, I think, than I did on the reading. But in any case, I made it all the way through this time. Okay, so Neal Stephenson is mostly known as a science fiction writer, and this book is a little bit of a departure for him. It is a science adjacent book, but not really science fiction exactly. It's kind of like Tomorrow. Um, what it is envisions a guy, Richard Forthrest, who has created a competitor to World of Warcraft, that kind of multiplayer game, online game. And in his version of this, there is a great focus on uh, real world geology within within the programming code itself, which means that things like gold are scarce. And Forthrest, he's a billionaire or a millionaire. I don't really know how much money he's got. He's got money. And he has developed this alternative called T-Rain, terrain, um, T-Rain, as basically something of an elaborate money laundering scheme that, he's also gone legit. He made a lot of his money in smuggling pot across the Canadian border back in the day. And this lays, this creates a backstory for him, and that he's got a property in Canada, just a little bit across the border, called the Schlues, and it is a ski lodge. But it's not one of these yuppie ski lodges. It's more of a highbrow kind of place where techie, nerdy people go because of his association with T-Rain. And okay, so what happens is in T-Rain, you can transfer the gold that is found in the game into real gold by sacrificing it to the gods and having it be burned up and burned off their basically. So if you collect a certain amount of gold, you can do this and get money in the real world. So someone has found an exploit, which is a virus called Reamde, which scrambles all of someone's files on their computer. And all they have to do is go and purchase a certain amount of gold, go to a place in the Ring D world and drop it off, and the troll will, the person who created this, the troll, will release their funds and give them and release their files. The amount of gold this person has to acquire is something like $75 in US money. So it's not much, but you do this to millions of people and you have millions of dollars of gold. So you have all of these people with $75 of gold going to this one place. So, of course, it creates a huge battle in the T-Rain universe to gain control of this gold by killing a character and taking their gold, etc. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that's the background. Okay, so Richard Forthrest is from, he's the guy who did this. He is from a, uh, a company, a family that lives in the backwoods of Iowa or something. I think Iowa. Anyway, it starts off with them all shooting guns at a range at a reunion. in the backyard range kind of thing in the reunion. And there he interacts with his niece, Zula. Now, Zula, unlike Richard Forthrest, is of Etre- Etraean descent, and she is adopted into the family. Okay. And so she is an African. She's dark skinned. She has a smattering of Arabic in her background. All of this will become relevant later. So they talk. She needs a job. He gives her a job. Her job is doing some coding thing for T-Rain. So she goes back to Seattle where she lives. And, she and her boyfriend Peter, and she's sitting there and she's doing her thing. And then uh, about, I don't know, 6 months later or so, they get an invite to go up to the Schloss to ski. And so they go up there, and while they're there, Peter has a weird interaction with this guy where he gives him a disc of, oh, we know. They don't know because it's happening on the other side of the room. They see it, but they don't know what's going on. Richard and Zula are watching, but they don't know what's going on. Peter gives this guy a disc, and on this disc are a list of credit card numbers that he got. Hmm. So this guy checks the numbers, makes sure they're good, and goes back to where he's going. But importantly, he has T-Rain on his computer. And on this disk, unbeknownst to either one of them, actually not a disk, it's a thumb drive. He also has it on a disk, and he takes the disk too. Well, it breaks the disk, destroys the disk, but he has a thumb drive. Puts on the thumb drive, and on the thumb drive, unbeknownst to either one of them, is Reamde. And so this person's computer who took these numbers gets infected. He goes immediately to his safe place, loads it up, and transfers it to his external drive. And Reamde goes along and corrupts all of his files. So now he's got to go into T-Rain and get these files back because, of course, he got these files for a Russian mobster type person. So he's in Vancouver. Zula and Peter go back to Seattle. He goes this guy goes to Vancouver and confronts them. They try to go and get it back, but he and Zula, both playing characters, can't get through because they keep getting killed. They can't get their $75 there. So as they're trying to get this done, the Russians show up, and Ivanov is the leader of the Russians, and other Russians. Sokolov is along. He is the hitman, not the hitman, kind of the security. He's the muscle, you know. Um, and well, they take Sokolov and Peter with them eventually to China because they have narrowed down where the hacker created Reamde through ISPs to China. They go to China and they wander around the city until they figure out where he's at. And he's in a apartment complex. He's either on the fourth or fifth floor. Well, Zula, who is the one who has to try to tell him which apartment he's in, she tells him the wrong one. She tells him the fourth and really on the fifth. So the Russians go and attack the people on the fourth floor, and they burst in with their automatic weapons and stuff and Uzis, thinking they're going to come across a bunch of sleeping Chinese hackers. What they come across is a cell of Islamic jihadists connected with Al Qaeda, and these people are there creating explosives in order to blow up something a little bit in this Chinese city. Well, all hell breaks loose and things go nuts. And the main jihadist eventually gets away, kills Ivanov, but Sokolov gets away. Well, wouldn't you know it? These Islamic terrorists are being watched by a British spy of Chinese descent who is across the street. And she is not a normal field agent. She's mostly a desk person, but she's been given this field operation to watch Abdullah Jones, the main terrorist leader who happens to come from, I think, Somalia. Anyway, he is a large African man. He gets away, of course, and kidnaps Zula. and then he takes Zulu with him on a small plane to from China to Canada, and they eventually wind up going through the Schloss to try to get ransom money for Zula and perhaps to uh, kidnap Richard Forthright and perhaps blackmail him too. Who knows exactly what their exact plan. So, part two. Whatever the plan is, what eventually happens is they wind up at the Schloss in a gun battle. And Sokolov, who the other Russian who got away, he uh, uh, connects with Olivia, who is that Chinese British spy, and they team up together and they both wind up there through different convoluted routes. Everyone winds up in this Canadian wilderness having a huge gun battle, and Richard Forthright finally gets a chance to, after a lot of convoluted nonsense, eventually kill um, Abdullah Jones. Now he and Zulu, in the end of it, he and Zulu go through post-traumatic stress disorder uh, counseling. Um, Richard's brother was killed. Zulu's boyfriend was killed. Both Zulu and Richard got heavily wounded, as did other people. Zulu starts a new relationship. The house of Richard's brother and Zulu's uncle, or perhaps her adopted father. There are many different relationships. I can't remember for sure. Is destroyed. So there's a lot of trauma to deal with. Um, and I'm not going through every single detail, but that's basically the plot. Okay, so what do I think of this? Well, I think that this novel has a serious problem with implausibility. Um, it tries to make things plausible. The characters are clumsy. Richard Forthrast is fat and falls on his ass a few times and this sort of thing. And Zulu, although she can shoot a gun and is very, very competent with firearms, she does not have a lot of practice in aiming them at people and shooting people. And so there's some, you know, conversation there about the difficulties of doing this and whatnot, and sort of a certain amount of clumsiness, this kind of thing. Okay, but there's a certain, just overriding implausibility about the whole thing. Okay. Yeah, it is true that in the 2010s, when this was written, it was plausible for there to be these kinds of criminals in uh, China and this kind of thing. But yeah, the whole thing is just an exercise in sort of ridiculous implausibility. And there's one moment that sort of gets passed over, which is just hideous, which is, well, it's two actually. One is these terrorists apparently set off a suicide bomb in the city in China. And it just kind of goes by the wayside, like, yeah, it happens. And then another thing, they blow up a bomb on the Canadian-U.S. border. And again, there's kind of this shrug, like, it happens. And then, and the terrorists have a really, 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 really hard time crossing the Canadian to the U.S. border. But at the same time, I mean, they don't they only actually manage to do it at the very end, really, uh, and then they're stopped. Um, and then the other part of it is, these people cross from the Chinese to the Philippine border, almost to the Taiwanese border. Uh, they get into China fairly simply. There's a lot of implausibility about the whole thing. It's a fun book, but if you're looking for plausibility, this would not be it. As for what this book means in the world of ideas, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Um, I'm sure that it would get ticked off for being a bit alarmist and racial in the way it depicts certain things. I mean, all the Muslims in this are bad. But then again, why would these particular obviously bad Muslims hang around with non-bad Muslims. And considering that Islam is a minority religion in these parts of the world where they're at, Canada and US at the end of the book, uh, it's plausible that there would be no good Muslims there. But still, it's going to get ticked off for having some, implausibly bad Muslims. And Mm, maybe Russians as well. Some stereotyping of Russians. Maybe, well, Chinese is more complicated uh, because, I mean, the whole point of the Chinese adventure there is we do see some diversity there. There is some very sick sex tourism bits in the Philippines, and I suspect that's probably more accurate than people want to know about. Hmm. But again, the whole thing just smacks of just, ludicrous implausibility after ludicrous implausibility. And I guess it's maybe, kind of the point here is sort of a chaos theory, kind of a um, butterfly wing kind of thing, you know, that the smallest little gesture here and there leads to these massive things happening. The Chinese hacker who creates Reamde, he's just looking for he and his buddies to get paid. He's not political in any meaningful sense of the way. Um, and at the very end, the fight is between these trained Islamic jihadists and these right-wing gun nuts in northern Idaho. Now, I don't know what Neal Stephenson's political allegiances are, but this struck me as the height of implausibility. And reading this in 2025 with what's going on in this country now, it reads even more ludicrous than it does in the book itself, because we know that I mean, I know gun nuts. They don't know how to shoot guns. They don't know how to kill people. It's a bunch of posturing and BS, and we all know it. And so, the idea that they'd actually ride to the rescue and this kind of thing, no, they wouldn't. They would freeze and piss their pants. They're worthless. And so for him to make them kind of sort of the backwards heroes of this book, so the writing is good, but I can't honestly recommend this book. Read something else by Neal Stephenson if you like his writing, because this one ain't it.